Yeah, welcome everybody. I'm very happy to welcome you in the name of the Berlin Center for Intellectual Diaspora. That's how our project is called. We are working as part of the network Cohesion via Conflict, and we are interested in all aspects of interreligious dialogue with a special focus on Catholic-Jewish exchange. And you can ask me afterwards, after the entire paper giving and discussion, what we have on this. You can also look it up on our good homepage, which is called intellectualdiaspora.org. There you can find everything about what we are doing and why we are doing it. And Stefan Steiner, who is the founder of it, is also with us and can perhaps be asked afterwards too. Now, everybody knows that Christians and Jews relate to the same scriptures, known as the Old Testament in the several Christian canons, known as the Tanakh in Judaism. Much has been said and will be said in this house about how Christians relate to this very scripture. And with our colleague Elad Lapidot's well-known Talmud classes, we also introduced here ways of Talmudic reading. But very rarely has it been debated in our dialogical environments which ways the biblical language took in becoming the everyday language of a modern state. What exactly did the artful resurrection of the Hebrew language do to this language? Did it send some of its aspects to the diaspora? Did it build a home again for this language, a new home? Just a few questions. I have the pleasure to introduce to you a renowned expert for these questions, Dr. Ruvik Rosenthal. Ruvik has just told us in preparation of this evening that one of his ancestors had founded a bookstore by the name Utopia in Berlin. To appreciate his personal and his family's history with Berlin and Tel Aviv would deserve many hours. In his novel Blumenstraße 22, he wrote about some aspects of it. But his professional passion is certainly the modern Hebrew language, about which he has written and taught a lot, including his PhD thesis on the language of the Israeli army. Please give a warm welcome to the head of the Israeli Association for the Study of Language and Society, Dr. Ruvik Rosenthal.
Okay. Old language, new language, the language of the Bible and modern Hebrew. So, modern Hebrew is founded on two pillars. The first is classical Hebrew, the combination of biblical and post-biblical Hebrew. The second consists on extensive influence of various languages on modern Hebrew, primarily Yiddish, Russian, German, very important, English, and Arabic. So my presentation, however, concerns only the first pillar. My central claim is that although there are various archaic features of style, grammar, syntax, and vocabulary in biblical Hebrew, it is nevertheless the definitive foundation of modern Hebrew. As I wrote in one of my books, maybe you can show it. In Hebrew, it's called Medabrim Bisfat HaTanakh, speaking the biblical language. And in English, it's like the name of our lecture, Old Language, New Language. So we usually speak of Hebrew in geological terms. The first layer, the most ancient, is biblical Hebrew, as you can see here, extends from 1000 to 2000 before Christ. Second, Mishnaic Hebrew, or the language of the sages, Leshon Chachamim, from 200 before to 800 AD. Third, medieval Hebrew is the religious text written from 800 till today. So we can speak about medieval in a way of metaphoric. It's religious. And four, of course, modern Hebrew. While the first three historical periods are based on written texts, modern Hebrew refers to the revival of Hebrew as an all-around language. That's how we call it. A language that is both spoken and written and is the main means of communication of a modern society, from the political and public spheres to the economic, the cultural, and educational. Over the course of the 20th century, it was a revival of ancient Hebrew that transformed modern Hebrew into a national language that became the mother tongue of generations of Sabras like me, born in Israel, and to become the second language for the majority of the 2 million Arab citizens living in Israel, as well as the language of most of the new immigrants who arrived to the young state from so many diasporas. Now, to understand how and why all this transformation happened, we must turn to the historical conditions that led to the revival of Hebrew. First and foremost, it is one of the main products of Zionism, of course. The idea that Hebrew would be the national language of the Jews in Israel was, in fact, surprisingly rejected in the early stages of the Zionist movement towards the end of the 19th century. Yet, step by step, for both ideological and practical reasons, this idea gained support as the obvious option. The Zionist ideology was simple. The people of the Bible should return to the land of the Bible, to Israel. Elieser Ben Yehuda, the man who devoted his life to the cause, added the third element, and they will speak the language of the Bible, Hebrew. This was necessary for a practical reason, since the Jews from diaspora spoke different languages, and they needed a common language. Hebrew was the natural choice. Since modern Hebrew was influenced by speech habits of Jews who came from many different centuries and by several foreign languages, a new linguistic term was adopted to describe it: Israeli Hebrew. Some linguists even argue that for the Hebrew speaker today, the language of the Bible is a foreign language, which must be taught as such, much like the Greek speaker must learn ancient Greek if he wishes to read the original text written by Plato or by Sophocles. Now, it is true that reading and understanding the Bible is quite difficult for many Israelis, most of them. Many words in the Bible are not used in modern Hebrew. The syntax is complicated, and modern Hebrew naturally prefers the Mishnaic syntax, not the biblical one. The answer to these arguments needs further clarification. Most of linguists agree that biblical Hebrew is the solid basis of modern Hebrew. But this must be based on the analysis of the classical layers. In my book, which you just could see, the literal translation of the Hebrew title, speaking the biblical language, tried to identify the various linguistic aspects of contemporary Hebrew. And what I found was that if you ignore its biblical foundations, you cannot understand describe or analyze modern Hebrew. This refers to almost every aspect of Hebrew. Though the syntax of the Bible is unique in many respects, its fundamental roots are the same as those of the syntax of modern Hebrew. And when we turn to morphology, the Semitic system of both biblical and modern Hebrew are the same, governed by the same rules. In what follows, I shall be focusing on the lexical aspect. The biblical vocabulary is exceedingly small, no more than 7,500 lexical entries, plus 500 Aramaic words entries. These numbers seem to prove that modern Hebrew, which now includes around 80,000 entries or words, cannot possibly be based on such a small vocabulary. But looking more closely at the contents of this tells a very different story. 2/3, 66% of the biblical vocabulary consists of basic words that deal with every aspect of human life, and of course adopted to modern Hebrew. So in modern Hebrew, 2/3 of the basic words are from the Bible. For example, the words for body organs, the heart, the head, legs, inner parts, from the Bible. Or the words that describe the landscape, mountains, hill, sea, river. The word for the family relations, father, mother, brother, son and daughter. The names for animals, plants, tools. The word for human emotions we use till today, love, hate, jealousy, joy, sorrow. There are 20 words for the emotions of fear, the emotion of fear, 20, some of which we continue to use today. The same applies to the word for political institutions, and I'll give some examples, and functions of the state, king and queen, judge, government. So if we analyze any current day text from the Israeli media or spoken language, as I noted before, 2 words or out of 3 will be biblical words. Even most of the new words that were coined in modern Hebrew are also based on biblical words, roots, and Semitic morphology. Moreover, the meaning of many biblical words were extended over time, though the original meaning is still felt in the modern use of the word. For example, the word regesh means in biblical Hebrew noise, and in post-biblical Hebrew physical sense, see, to hear, etc. Modern Hebrew speakers uses it as emotion. To support my central claim, I will demonstrate how biblical Hebrew was used to enlarge and enrich modern Hebrew in 3 distinct fields. First, the Zionist lexicon. Second, the secularization of religious terms. And third, the political lexicon of the State of Israel. I will also refer to the rich corpus of biblical idioms and phrases. So let's see. Let's begin with Zionism. The name of the Jewish national movement, Zionismus, yes? The Zionist movement is a classical example of toponym, the name of a particular place. Zion appears 154 times in the Bible, out of which 4 times it appears as the name of a fortress conquered by King David to the south of Mount Moriah near Jerusalem. By enlarging its use, Zion became the name of Jerusalem, and later the name of the entire land of Israel. Zion is the symbolic land, the idea embedded in the promised land to which the Jews prayed and yearned to return throughout the long centuries of exile. Zion's symbolic status recurs in many biblical verses, as in Isaiah. You can see it here. For Zion's sake will I not hold my peace, and for Jerusalem's sake I will not rest. It is often personified. Zion sings, Zion is merry, it sometimes grieves when abandoned by God. At times it mocks, at other times it rests for action. The phrase, the daughter of Zion, elevates and magnifies its status beyond its geographical location. Lamentation book. What thing shall I liken to thee, O daughter of Jerusalem? What shall I equal to thee that I may comfort thee, O virgin daughter of Zion? The verses that best clarify why Zion became the name of the new national movement were those spoken in exile after the destruction of the first temple in the 6th century before Christ. There is one such verse that almost every Jew can recite. And not only Jews, because it became a song. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept, when we remembered Zion, from Psalms. Zion also appears in the ethos of the return to the land of Israel. And the ransomed of the Lord shall return and come to Zion with songs, Isaiah. The origin of the phrase Shivat Zion, the return to Zion, is in the book of Psalms. When the Lord turned against captivity of Zion, we were like them that dream. Hayinu kecholmim, once those who know Hebrew. Zion is a dream that yearns to become a reality. And Zionism is a concrete attempt to turn that dream into reality, a historical duplication of the biblical return of the exiled Jews from Babylon to build the second temple. In Rabbinic literature, called in Hebrew Sifrut Chazal, the literature of the sages, Zion appears mainly in quotations from the Bible. In his poem, Zion Halotish Ali, won't you ask Zion? The medieval poet Yehuda Halevi reiterates the ethos and combines the misfortune of exile with a dream of return. Many other poets followed his footsteps. Zion later appears in the Haskalah, Enlightenment, Jewish Enlightenment literature, as in the title of the novel by its leading novelist, Abraham Mapu, Ahavat Zion, the love for Zion. But the direct link between the biblical Zion and modern usage is manifested in the name of several of Jewish national movements that sprang up in Europe during the 19th century. Lovers of Zion, the Zion Brotherhood, Sons of Zion, Return to Zion, and so forth. Now, in 1882, dozens of these movements formed a federation called Chibat Zion, literally foundness of Zion. Although the federation did not last, it inspired the Germans to coin the word Zionismus, which you know. The Jewish Austrian intellectual Nathan Birnbaum gave the word its Hebrew form, from Zionismus to Zionut. That was how it happened. The complete process of founding the national movement and realizing its ideas is known today as the Zionist project. Of course, it's one of many examples how the Zionist lexicon used adopted biblical terms. Second aspect I will speak about is secularization of religious terms. One of the forms of this form of linguistic adaptation of biblical words to modern Hebrew involved the adoption of what were originally religious terms of Jewish liturgy to non-religious or secular contexts. This secular shift, how we call it, also occurred in other languages. For example, today the meaning of the word holiday, which originally meant a holy celebration of a religious feast, has been generalized. Similarly, the word minister, which for many generations referred to a high-ranking religious position, today refers to a high-ranking political role in the government or the administration. The Greek word hierarchy originally referred to the order of angels and heavenly powers, and is today used to refer to the ranking system of modern governing institutions. But this process of secularization of the meaning of Hebrew words takes unique form in the history of Hebrew. Why? We generally divide it into three historical phases, not two. One, you can see it, general or earthly meaning, which you find it in the Bible, and of course I'll give some example. Second, sanctification of Hebrew words from general earthly to the religious meaning. And third, the secularization of the meaning of sacred words to all over or earthly words. So let's give some ideas. The Bible, along the 800 years through which it was created, had one clear purpose: to influence the people of Israel to adhere to the faith in the one and only God, Jehovah. But most of the books of the Bible are not merely religious. They include legends, myths, historical events, and so forth. They tell us about the life of living communities and the life of ordinary people. Thus, the main secular shift occurred in the post-biblical Hebrew that served Jewish religious communities for many, many centuries. Even the main word in the semantic field, dat is a Hebrew name for religion. It means in the biblical use a rule, a state law, which derives from the Persian word data, which you all know, data, yes? And it means in Persian, what is given. Its particular religious meaning is post-biblical, the rules or orders of Moses. Now, the sanctification of Hebrew was a result of the important ruling of the Hebrew. This was necessary because Hebrew in the diaspora had ceased to be a living spoken language. So, if no one used it in daily life, the sacred Jewish text, the Bible, would be abandoned. Nobody can read it. and the Jewish culture, religion, and existence would be doomed. Thus, the sanctification of the language saved Jewish culture and religion by turning Hebrew into the sacred language that every Jewish male must pray in, must study, and teach. In Hebrew, we call it Leshon HaKodesh, the language of holiness. And in this language of holiness, you have to deal with the holy texts, but not with everyday texts, and not as a spoken language. That was the idea, and it was very important to the continuation of the Jewish religion, culture, etc. Two common biblical words illustrate this shift much more, but I give two examples. Tahor, pure, and avodah, work. The verb begin with the verb. The verb la'avod, to work, and the noun avodah, work. In the Bible, the verb appears 300 times, and the noun 150. In most of the appearances, they simply mean work, doing something for a living, or working for someone. In 50 cases of the verb and 50 of the noun, the work refers to a service to God. It's a working in the temple. That's work. But, for example, keeping the Passover ritual is called in Exodus avodah. Now, the English translation uses religious word because they understood it religious, but in the Bible, it's the word avodah, which is basically not religious. But in the translation, we say, and when your children ask you, what do you mean by this rite? In Hebrew, ma ha'avodah hazot lachem? You shall say, it is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord. Or in Malachi, one of the dozen prophets, we find the phrase, Oved Elohim, the man who is worker of God, translated as to English or Greek, etc., him who has served God. So we see that the sanctification of avodah has its roots in the Bible. In the post-biblical Hebrew, avodah means simply God's work, avodat kodesh, a biblical phrase for itself, holy serving, performing the holy rites. Avodah zarah, to those who know a bit about Talmud, avodah zarah, literally foreign work, means profane work, idolatry or paganism. In modern Hebrew, avodah and oved return to its early earthly use, and both are basic terms of the Zionist immigrants, working and building the all-new homeland. Ha'adam ha'oved, the working man, became the icon of the new Israel. Tnuat ha'avodah, the labor movement, today almost disappeared, but let's not talk politics, is the name of the left-wing parties in Israel until these days. On the other hand, the ultra-Orthodox use this term in its strictly religious meaning. A devoted Haredi is called Oived, like in Yiddish, you know. Oved in Ashkenazi accent, the devoted Jew who worship his God. Now to the other example I gave, tahor. Tahor has three meanings. Pure, you remember? Which means, and they are all presented in the Bible, all the three. The first meaning is concrete and earthly and refers to a pure, a clean place. Makom tahor means a place that is without any alien elements. Pure gold Zahav tahor means gold that is without base metals. A pure material or place is superior to a dirty one, which was called tameh, impure. The second meaning of tahor is transcendent. A pure thing, davar tahor, is that which has no cosmic evil in it, no satanic elements. Only something pure can serve or be sacrificed to God. The third meaning of tahor is ethical or moral. A pure person, Adam tahor, or lev tahor in the Bible, is a moral person with no evil through thoughts and no evil or sinful deeds. The earthly meaning is the original meaning of the word, with the transcendent and ethical meanings deriving from it. But there is a shift in the plot of tahor. So, what is the meaning of tahor in modern Hebrew? It is not enough to focus here on semantics. We must look at usage, and here we find a strange development. The earthly meaning is hardly ever used. If the floor is clean, we don't say haritzpa, the floor, tehora. We say it's clean, nekiya. We do, however, use it to refer to the purity of air and water. Metaher avir in the lu, okay. We hardly ever use the word in the moral context. On the other hand, this adjective tahor, or its noun tohar, has today a negative meaning. Tohar hageza, racial purity. Some of you can remember this thing, this term, leads us to Nazism. The phrase ethnic cleansing is translated as tehur ethni, cleaning from another ethnic group, which all over the world, referring to genocide. Eliminating enemy positions in English, mopping up, is in Hebrew called tehur. Here we can see why it may not be so easy for some biblical words to adjust to a modern context and values. Modern society sees purity as something anti-human and even dirty or undesirable. Also in linguistics, the purists are banned because language is not pure, it's something else. Liberal thought rejects the concept of purity, thus limiting the use of the word to the theological discourse and sometimes to the moral legal discourse, as in the phrase kavanot tehorot, pure intention. We can trace the changing uses of biblical words through their Talmudic variants to modern Hebrew by focusing on key words in the public arena. The founders of the State of Israel needed a whole new vocabulary when it came to creating modern political institutions. The state legal system, its army, military establishment, and so on. They found this vocabulary in various sources. For example, the State of Israel chose basic biblical word for its institutions. Memshala means government, but it appears in the story of the creation, the first chapter of Genesis. Memshelet hayom u'memshelet halayla. Literally, you say, Memshelet hayom, governing the day, is the sun, governing the night is the moon. Or a sar, a minister, is of course a word from the Bible. The first temple, which was designed and built during the 40 years of the Israelites wandering in the desert, as described in Exodus, is called HaMishkan. Remember this name? This is the Hebrew word for the tabernacle. Literally, The word means a place of habitation, and as such, it appears 10 times in the Bible. But most of its appearances refer to the desert tabernacle or to the later holy temple. So this is a place where God lives, where he inhabits, yes? So it became a religious symbol. In Israel, modern Israel, Mishkan is used to refer to the highly regarded symbols of the new state, like a tabernacle. For example, Mishkan HaKnesset, the House of Parliament. Mishkan HaNasi, the official residence of the President of Israel, etc. And I have to say that also Nasi, president, is coming, of course, from the Bible, is a big leader. Knesset, the parliament, is coming from the sages, and it is the high court in the Mishnaic era. The name of the modern government officers combine biblical terms with English loan translation, principally. But the biblical word otsar means treasure. So the Ministry of Finance or Department of the Treasury in the States is called Misrad HaOtzar, word from the Bible. The Ministry of Defense is called Misrad HaBitachon. And this is very interesting. It was coined by Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion, who had a very important influence on language, though he was a politician. But he loved the Bible. The word bitachon appears 3 times in the Bible, but in all 3, it does not refer to war or a military context, but rather expresses an emotion, a sense of confidence and faith. By choosing this particular biblical term, Ben-Gurion shifted the focus of the army from its military task to the need of the public to feel secure. This use, as in many other cases, was met by strong reactions from the ultra-Orthodox circles who felt that the holy language has been profaned. Fortunately, nobody listened to them. Last, not least, idioms and phrases. We turn to the subject of idioms and phrases, which I believe are extremely important when we attempt to understand another culture. I can tell you that I published a very comprehensive dictionary of idioms and phrases in Hebrew some years ago, which is become, I can say, iconic. But there were thousands of idioms in the Bible, many of which are commonly used in modern Hebrew, without a shred of anachronism. It's a miracle. As far as we can tell, many of these idioms have maintained their original meanings. For example, the idiom Ish hayashar be'enav ya'aseh from the book of Judges. It means, literally, every man did that which was right in his own eyes. It refers to a situation of social anarchy. Similarly, in the book of Zephaniah, we read, I shall seek Jerusalem with candles. אני אחפש, חיפשתי את ירושלים בנרות. And today we can often hear similar phrases such as, I sought him with candles. חיפשתי אותו בנרות, meaning made tremendous efforts to find him. Some biblical idioms are used in the spoken language and known by every Hebrew-speaking child. מצאתי חן בעיניו literally means, I found grace in his eyes, which means he likes me. In the Bible, it is an ordinary form of greetings. But in some cases, it shares an important nuance. In Genesis, we are told that Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. It means that Noah saw that God was merciful towards him and saved him from the flood because he was a righteous man. Or another phrase, Pachad Elohim, means God fear, which appears in the book of Samuel and in the Psalms, and is common phrase in spoken Hebrew for an extremely frightening event. Haya Pachad Elohim. It's spoken word. The phrase, this is the most nice example, Cholat Ahava, means love sick. She feels love and she feels sick of love. Come from the Song of Songs, meaning love sick, same. I will say it in English. Stay me with flagons, comfort me with apples, for I am sick of love. Resembles the slang phrase, Ani chole alaich, or Ani chola alecha, means I love you so much. I feel sick when I love you. These are just few examples out of very rich stock of idioms to which many Talmudic terms were later added and which automatically connect all modern Hebrew users to the cultural and linguistic ancestors' roots. So I believe that the kind of examples and explanation I have presented to you show how the old Hebrew of the Bible, along with its stories of human folly and human heroism, and above all its sublime poetry of the human soul, is alive and kicking, as the saying goes, in today's all-encompassing new Hebrew. So thank you, and thank the Catholic Academy Institute, and thank you, Gesina, for inviting me.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Ruvik, for this very rich presentation. I have a lot of questions, and I think you have questions too. So I only use my privilege of having the first question, perhaps, and then open the floor. You may ask your questions in German or English. I'll, if necessary, translate. Who is comfortable with English is heartily invited to ask their questions in English, which just quickens the procedure, but we can also manage the other way around. Yes, my first question, as we are here at the Center for Intellectual Diaspora, is relating to the process which you described in 3 steps. First, it was a kind of earthly language, then it became sanctified during a long time of diaspora and thus survived. And then, in order to be revived, was again earthified, yes, so to speak. And you only hinted at ultra-Orthodox people protesting against it. And I remember also Gershom Scholem, for example, warning, alerting severely against the everyday use, although he participated in it and contributed a lot to making Hebrew a modern scholarly language, but still he was anxious and sometimes afraid and thought the language might come back on us and bring to us and will reawaken for us all sorts of troubles from biblical times. Pachad Elohim, Keilu.
Well, Gershom Scholem was a genius and so important, and some of his ideas are very important, but he was absolutely wrong in this prophecy. I don't think Hebrew became, and first of all, Hebrew became richer and richer and richer, and it never abandoned its basic meanings meanings or nuances in the Bible, etc. It's combined. Everything was combined. Ben Yehuda was a genius by combining, by taking all the parts of language and all the diaspora people to one language. And today, Israel is a very divided society in many aspects. It's a very conflicting time, as some of you may know. Language is the only aspect of Jewish culture and of Zionism that is a consensus and is loved by everybody. And some say, because of this, that Ben Yehuda is more important than Herzl, because his idea of language to combine us together succeeded. And the prophecy of Gershon Scholem is something that he felt, but it was not accomplished. I cannot see it anywhere.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we have spent our time well. And I thank you all for your attention, for coming to us. I thank you for your patient answering of all questions you could. And yes, I now have the pleasure to invite you for a little reception outside, so you can go on with talking and thinking about the Hebrew. And yes, thank you to the interpreter for doing his job all the time, constantly. And for the technical team, which is always so supportive. So thanks a lot and have a great evening. Toda.